morning and welcome to the quarterly press briefing for the Planning Institute of Jamaica. Welcome to all fellow journalists and representatives from the media online, stakeholders in financial organizations, and also PIOJ staff who are online. At this point in time, just reminding you that if you do have any questions or comments, you may post them in the Q&A and they will be seen by a moderator. We're also live on YouTube, and any questions will be monitored there as well. We're now handing over to Mrs. Blake Hall. Thank you.
From Marcia.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us at the Planning Institute of Jamaica quarterly press briefing. Today, the Director General, Dr. Wayne Henry, will provide preliminary estimates on the performance of the economy for the October to December 2022 period. Dr. Henry is supported by Mr. James Stewart, Senior Director, Economic Planning and Research Division. At the end of the presentation, we will take your questions. Dr. Henry, you may go ahead.
Thank you very much, Marcia. Good morning, everyone. Before I provide the details on economic performance, let me take this opportunity to remind you of the purpose of these quarterly economic estimates provided by the PIOJ. The PIOJ presents preliminary estimates on economic performance for each quarter, approximately 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed. This is based on the latest available information from major data providers. There is an increasing need for modern economies to have more timely data for economic agents to make more informed decisions about macroeconomic developments. The release of the preliminary estimate is consistent with global trends, where it is a common practice to release a first, second, and even a third preliminary estimate before the final official figures are released. In the case of Jamaica, the PIOJ releases the preliminary growth estimate within the first 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed, and Statin releases the official GDP figures at the end of the 3rd month following the quarter being reviewed. The release of preliminary Outturn information is used by various stakeholders, including our international development partners, the private sector, as well as the government, for whom the magnitude and direction of sectoral performance is critical to inform planning and policy-related decisions. I would also like to reiterate that trends have shown that the gap between our initial estimate and the subsequent estimate produced by Statin is usually larger in times of extraordinary shocks and recovery, That is, the variation between PIOJ's estimate and Statin's subsequent estimate is likely to be outside the usual band, both at the industry level as well as the overall growth outturn. Today, we are reporting an estimated real value added growth of 3.4% for the October to December 2022 quarter relative to the corresponding quarter of 2021. The estimated outturn for the review quarter largely reflected the positive impact of one, a strengthening of economic activity, as some industries showed signs of returning to and surpassing their pre-COVID levels of output. Two, increased external demand, supported by growth in the economies of Jamaica's main trading partners. Three, increased capacity utilization, as a major alumina producer ramped up production following their reopening in the previous quarter. And four, increased business and consumer confidence associated with the prospects for strengthened economic outturn in the short to medium term. Real sector developments in the goods producing industry. The goods producing industry is estimated to have increased by 4.3% due to an improved performance in 3 of the 4 industries, namely agriculture, forestry and fishing, mining and quarrying, and manufacturing. Agriculture. Real value added for the agriculture, forestry and fishing industry was estimated to have grown by 5%. This improved performance reflected the positive impact of one, an increase in domestic hectares reaped, up 5%, two, increased demand, particularly from the tourism sector associated with its continued recovery, and three, the continuation of measures implemented by the government to improve output in the industry. Growth was driven by higher output in all components of the industry, led by other agricultural crops and the traditional export crops. Other agricultural crops was estimated to have grown by 2.9%, reflecting higher production in 6 of the 9 crop groups. The most significant increases were recorded for plantains up 20.5%, cereals up 13.6%, yams up 8.8%, and fruits up 7.5%. Output of traditional export crops increased by 19.6%, largely driven by increased production of sugarcane up 36.8%, coffee up 11.9%, and banana up 20.8%. These increases outweighed a 36.1% decline in cocoa production. Animal farming is estimated to have increased by 5.8% due to a 5.9% growth in broiler meat production and a 7.9% increase in egg production. Mining and quarrying. Real value added for the mining and quarrying industry increased by 115.9%. Alumina production increased by 191.8% due to the reopening of the Jamalco refinery, which was not operational during the corresponding quarter of 2021. As a consequence, the alumina capacity utilization rate increased to 29.4%, up 19.3 percentage points. However, crude bauxite production fell by 12.8%. Consequently, the bauxite capacity utilization rate decreased to 44.8%, down 6.6 percentage points. Manufacturing. Real value added for the manufacturing industry grew by an estimated 3.7% due to increased output in both the food, beverages, and tobacco and the other manufacturing sub-industries. The growth in the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry reflected higher production for poultry meat, up 5.9%, edible fats, up 7.1%, sugar, up 53.2%, and dairy products, up 3.5%. However, the beverages subcomponent was estimated to have declined, reflecting lower production of rum and alcohol, down 36.4%, and carbonated beverages, down 2.3%. Other manufacturing was estimated to have grown, largely reflecting an expansion in the production of petroleum products, mainly due to a higher refinery service factor, as a petroleum refinery was open for approximately 86 days relative to 48 days in the corresponding quarter of 2021. Production of all petroleum products surveyed increased, led by liquid petroleum gas, LPG, up 1,070.4%, gasoline up 116.9%, automotive diesel oil, ADO, up 108.2%, and fuel oil up 85.4%. For chemicals and chemical products, increases were recorded for aluminum sulfate, up 80.7%, and salt, up 11%. For non-metallic minerals, there was an estimated decline due to cement, down 16.8%, and clinker, down 6.2%. Construction. Real value added for the construction industry decreased by 4.7% due to a contraction in the building construction component, which outweighed an estimated increase in the other construction component. This performance was reflected in a 12.3% real decline in the sales of construction-related inputs. The estimated contraction in the building construction component was mainly influenced by decreases of 8.4% in housing starts, 5% in the value of mortgages by the NHT, and 24.3% in the volume of mortgages dispersed by the NHT. Growth in the other construction component was due to an increase in capital expenditure on civil engineering activities by entities, including NROC, which disbursed $2.2 billion relative to $0.15 billion in the corresponding quarter of 2021. Expenditure facilitated works on Part A of the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project, SCHIP, that is, the Maypen in Clarendon to Williamsfield in Manchester component, and JPS, which disbursed $4.9 billion, up $1 billion, for the expansion of the electricity distribution network. Developments in the services industry. The services industry was estimated to have grown by 3% relative to the corresponding quarter of the previous year, reflecting higher real value added for all industries, with the exception of the wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, WR trim industry. Electricity and water supply. The electricity and water supply industry is estimated to have recorded growth in real value added of 1.7%, reflecting increases in both electricity and water consumption. Electricity consumption grew by 1.3% due to higher consumption in 3 of the 6 categories. Higher sales were recorded for general service, that's small businesses using less than 25 kilovolt ampere kVA, up 7.1%. Power service, that's large businesses using more than 25 kVA but less than 500 kVA, up 5.4%. And largest power, single locations that have a minimum peak demand of 2,000 kVA, was up 12.4%. Lower sales were recorded for residential, down 2.4%. Large power, that's businesses using more than 500 kVA, down 11%, and street lighting plus other, down 3.5%. The decline in consumption within the residential category was associated with the removal of COVID-19 containment measures, which facilitated more persons returning to the physical workplace, schools, and other activities. Of the 14 parishes, 9 recorded increased electricity sales, led by Clarendon, up 9.2%, Hanover, up 4.5%, and Westmoreland, up 4.1%. The increased electricity consumption in Clarendon may be associated with the resumption of production activities at the Jamalco refinery. Water consumption grew by 3.3%, reflecting growth in the Eastern Division, up 2%, and the Western Division, up 5.8%. 4 of the 6 service classes recorded higher consumption, led by schools, up 54.7%, commercial, up 12%, government, up 2.8%, and condominium, up 1%. Declines were recorded for the groups residential and employee. Transport, storage, and communication. Real value added for the transport, storage, and communication grew by 3.8%, mainly due to higher levels of activities in the transport and storage sub-industry. The outturn was driven by, one, an increase in the air transport component, largely reflecting growth in passenger movements, up 46.6%, due to departures, up 44.9%, and arrivals, up 43.1%. And two, an increase in the maritime transport component, driven by a 15.8% growth in the volume of cargo handled at outports. This outweighed an estimated 0.3% decline in cargo volumes handled at the Port of Kingston. Wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, WR trim. Real value added for the WR trim industry was estimated to have declined by 1.3% due to a normalization of output following the strong recovery from the negative impact of COVID-19. Performance was also influenced by a decrease of 4% to US $535.5 million in net remittance inflows and a decline in the related construction industry, resulting in less construction-related commodities being traded. Lower sales were recorded for 6 of the 8 goods categories, including wholesale and repair of household goods and office equipment, down 12.8%, hardware, building supplies, electrical goods and machinery, down 11.6%, motor vehicles, auto repairs and accessories, down 4.1%, and agriculture, food, beverages, and tobacco, down 2.2%. Finance and insurance services. Real value added for the finance and insurance services industry was estimated to have grown by 1%. The performance was influenced by higher net interest income and fees and commission income, facilitated by a rise in economic activity and growth in business and consumer confidence. Hotels and restaurants. Real value added for the hotels and restaurants industry was estimated to have grown by 24.3%. Total stopover visitor arrivals for October to November 2022 increased by 43.8% relative to October to November 2021. Cruise passenger arrivals for the months of October and November totaled 195,135 passengers from 68 ship calls relative to 32,719 passengers from 24 ship calls during the corresponding period of 2021. Visitor expenditure was estimated to have increased by 46.3% to US $543.7 million for the months of October and November 2022. GDP performance for January to December 2022. For the calendar year 2022, real GDP was estimated to have increased by 5.1%. This reflected higher real value added for both the goods producing industry, up 2.1%, and the services industry, up 6%. All industries are estimated to have recorded growth in output, with the exception of the construction and mining and quarrying industries. Growth during 2022 was led by hotels and restaurants, up 48.9%, other services, up 11.1%, agriculture, forestry, and fishing, up 9%, and transport, storage, and communication, up 6%. Looking at the employment update. Regarding the labor force, it should be noted that full recovery was projected for this fiscal year. However, no labor market surveys were conducted for October 2022 and January 2023, given that the resources of Statin are now focused on conducting the national census. Full recovery of the employed labor force, therefore, cannot be officially determined until fiscal year 2023-24. The most recent labor market update was conducted in July 2022, at which time the unemployment rate was 6.6% and the employed labor force was 1,272,700 persons, And this was 4,700 persons fewer than the pre-COVID-19 high, which was recorded in January of 2020. Looking at the short-term economic outlook, that's January to March 2023, and the fiscal year 2022-23, and fiscal year 2023-24. Looking at the short-term prospects for the Jamaican economy, generally the prospects remain positive, given the following factors. One, relative stability in the macroeconomy, evidenced by a tempering of the inflation outturn, consecutive quarters of better than programmed fiscal balances, and 7 consecutive quarters of economic growth. Two, improved optimism about future prospects among firms. 3, strengthened demand stemming from increased economic activities as most industries are forecast to grow. 4, continued recovery in the economies of Jamaica's main trading partners, which augurs well for increased external demand, for example, for tourism services. For the January to March 2023 quarter, the economy is expected to grow within the range of 3% to 5%. Growth will be led by the strong performances for hotels and restaurants and the mining and quarrying industries. For January 2023, preliminary airport arrivals grew by 63.8%, and alumina production increased by 125.7%. For fiscal year 2022-23, the economy is projected to grow within the range of 4% to 6%. It is important to note that should the economy perform as expected for the remainder of fiscal year 2022-23, Jamaica's GDP would have fully recovered to pre-COVID-19 levels in this fiscal year, earlier than the initially projected date of fiscal year 2023-24. For fiscal year 2023-24, the economy is projected to grow within the range of 1% to 3%, largely reflecting, one, a faster than expected pace of recovery in the previous fiscal year, leading to an earlier than anticipated normalization of output and a return to the long-term trend of growth. And two, a deterioration in the economic outlook for some of Jamaica's main trading partners, which has implications for our external demand. GDP performance in fiscal year 2023-24 is anticipated to be driven by, one, continued robust performance in stopover arrivals, facilitated by increased room capacity and intensified marketing efforts. It should be noted that for the months of October to November 2022, Jamaica recorded its highest level of stopover arrivals. That is, stopover arrivals have already surpassed its pre-COVID-19 high, and this partly reflects the measures implemented during the pandemic to build resilience in the tourism sector, for example, the Resilience Corridor. Two, increased alumina output, driven by the resumption and gradual ramping up of operations at the Jamalco refinery relative to the lower output in the previous fiscal year. Three, higher levels of output in the construction industry, supported by the rollout of public sector supported and private sector led infrastructure and building projects, for example, road construction projects and new hotel construction. Upside potential exists for this outlook, arising from, one, greater than expected growth in the economies of Jamaica's major trading partners, which could lead to stronger external demand for Jamaica's goods and services. Two, normalization of supply chains that would facilitate a lowering of input prices and an improvement in the movement of goods. And three, stronger than expected increase in capacity utilization, especially in the mining and quarrying industry that has been operating significantly below capacity. There are also main downside risks that would include extreme weather events, production downtime due to aged equipment in some industries, example, manufacturing and mining and quarrying, and lower demand from Jamaica's main trading partners related to slower than expected economic recovery. If there's a persistence of supply shocks and tightened monetary conditions globally. Let me speak on socioeconomic and environmental trends and opportunities, and specifically the aging population. The increase in global shocks have underscored the importance of building resilience to secure the gains won in the last decade in order to facilitate sustainable and inclusive growth and development. To this end, it is important that we identify, anticipate, and position the country to benefit from emerging trends. One such development is a projected aging and decline in Jamaica's population, as reported in the United Nations World Population Prospects 2022. Aging is part of the natural course of demographic changes and occurs as a result of the interplay of longer lives and decline in fertility. The elderly population accumulates expertise, knowledge, and experience that contribute significantly to society. It is therefore critical that Jamaica adapts to that change, as it becomes counterproductive when timely action for adaptation is not taken. As time progresses, the structure of the Jamaican population will undergo demographic transition. That is, where a significant proportion of the country's population is in the child age cohort, to periods in which the working age population grows much faster than the population that depends on it, which we are seeing now. This creates a window of opportunity to accelerate production and consumption, referred to as a first demographic dividend. It also creates an opportunity to invest in physical and human capital, that is, education and health of families. As a population transitions again, becoming top-heavy, the elderly population, that is, persons aged 65 and over, will double by the year 2050. The working age group, that is, persons aged 15 to 64 years, will be declining, and the child population, persons under 15 years, will be stabilizing at much lower levels. This shift is expected to temper the pace of growth and create additional health expenditure. However, if the country does well in building up physical and human capital during the first demographic dividend, it creates an opportunity for higher productivity and growth, referred to as a second demographic dividend. These dividends and gains are not automatic and therefore require actions to be taken to ensure dividends are attained at each stage. To that end, the PIOJ is highlighting the importance of the following policy initiatives. 1, productivity. The productivity of the labor force is critical to ensure that production outweighs consumption so that persons can invest in their future consumption while strengthening individual and collective ability to earn and consume. By 1, strengthening the education and training system to reskill and upskill the labor force to take advantage of existing and emerging industries. 2, strengthening the healthcare system through advocating preventive health care, given Jamaica's relatively high prevalence of non-communicable diseases, NCDs, which restricts the size and productivity of the labor force, especially of older persons. 3, improving social security coverage within the working age population so that no one is left behind. This will avert the future burden of welfare budgets on the state, as older populations increase in numbers and live longer in retirement. 4, reducing informality, which is usually associated with lower wages, relatively poor working conditions, and no pension. These conditions may reduce persons' ability to save for the future. 5, improving financial access and literacy by creating new instruments that facilitate savings, especially for pension and the creation of wealth, as well as educating persons on the importance of saving for their future. This will also require the continued strengthening and safeguarding of the financial system. And 6, encouraging and supporting healthy lifestyles and strengthening the care economy, for example, by increasing access to childcare for parents, especially for females who would like to rejoin the labor force, given that most of the work in the unpaid care economy is borne by them. While policy has a part to play in achieving the demographic dividends, each family also has a role to play to ensure that they take advantage of the opportunities and minimize the risks associated with the aging of the population. by reprioritizing education and training, as well as preventive health within the family to build human capital. It will also mean taking advantage of programs to improve financial literacy, to leverage financial products that meet the savings and investment needs of the family. Population aging is a feature of development. The demographic transitions present opportunities for the entire country to benefit and for the inter-country advances as well. Real growth will result in more allocable resources for social transformation. So in summary, the Jamaican economy continued to recover during the review quarter, with some industries already surpassing pre-COVID-19 levels of output. The latest projections indicate that the Jamaican economy is likely to fully recover to pre-COVID-19 output in fiscal year 2022-23, earlier than the previously projected fiscal year 2023-24. The recovery of the employed labor force is expected to be confirmed in fiscal year 2023-24. As more industries recover, the expectation is that in fiscal year 2023-24, the pace of economic growth will slow, similar to that of the global economy. With this in mind, the government's economic team has refocused its efforts on building economic resilience by removing inhibitors to growth and developing policy initiatives geared at addressing these constraints to support the continued expansion of economic activity during the medium term. These include continued mainstreaming of climate resilience in government investment decisions to build environmental resilience, examination of Jamaica's labor markets to identify skill gaps in meeting the demand for existing and new industries to build labor mobility and social resilience. This is important to maximize the opportunities and minimize the challenges as the population ages. Continued diversification of the Jamaican economy to increase economic resilience to global and economic shocks in any one industry by increasing the complexity and the opportunities to produce new and higher value-added products. It is intended that the PIOJ, working in partnership with the various ministries, departments, and agencies, academia, as well as our international development partners, will be in a position to share more details on these assessments to inform decision-making by key stakeholders following Cabinet's considerations during the upcoming fiscal year. Finally, I want to recognize a very dedicated and hardworking team here at the PIOJ. I also want to remind us all to continue the whole of society collaboration as we sustain our efforts to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you, DG. Remember that if you have any questions, you can put it in the room. Gwyneth? There are no questions, DG.
For the slow typers, we'll give a little time.
Time for the slow typers. Remind me of GDP growth for this quarter, DG.
This quarter, as in October.
October to December.
3.4%.
3.4%. Gwyneth?
Reminding anyone who is in the press briefing at this moment. Yes, I see Douglas McIntosh is asking if there's an update on Vision 2030.
Not this quarter, we'll have it next quarter.
Thank you. Next quarter is an update, and there's another comment, if I may just read it out.
Go ahead.
This is from Siobhan from Nationwide. He's saying there is an anticipation of a labor market crunch. Has this been factored into the PIOJ's growth figures?
Yes, it has. Hence, as we normalize, we expect closer. It's on. You're here. You're here. Yes, it has been factored in. Hence, looking forward, we're expecting a normalization of the growth rate. We'll notice that the pace of growth will slow. Although we're expecting growth within the 1 to 3%, you'll realize it's lower than the 4+% we're coming from for 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Is there another?
Shall I go ahead and read it? This is from Kelly Miles from the Jamaica Observer. Her question is, when was the Jamaica plant brought back into operation?
That would have been July 2022. But it has gradually ramped up production since. It started at restarted at very low levels, but it has ramped up production since.
So you have anticipated her follow-up question, which is it operating at full capacity?
Not yet. We expect as time goes on, it will eventually reach about 70 to 80%, which is normal operating capacity. It will unlikely operate at 100%, but the expectation is that it will gradually ramp up as the year goes on.
I don't think there are any other questions. No. If not, thanks for joining us. Thanks for participating. Join us again in May when we will report on the January to March period. The presentation you can find on our social media and website pages. You can also send your questions to info@pioj.gov.jm. And those are displayed on the screen, the places where you can get the presentation. Have a good day and stay safe.